All right, let's get into a really cool story today from the world of beekeeping. It's about this one experiment that basically flipped decades of conventional wisdom completely upside down and led to this totally unheard of winter survival rate for bees. It's pretty wild.
So let's kick things off with a big question. Imagine this. What if the biggest mistake you could make in winter beekeeping is the one thing everyone thinks is right? What if the standard practice, the thing everyone tells you that you have to do to keep your bees safe, is actually what's hurting them the most?
Okay, so our story really starts with this beekeeper, Andrew Munn. And like a lot of beekeepers, he was running into the same frustrating problem, year after year. It wasn't that he was losing a crazy number of hives over the winter. The real issue was that the ones that did make it to spring were, well, they were often pretty weak and just struggling to get going.
See, for Andrew, it wasn't just about getting the bees to survive. Not at all. He was after consistency. He was just so tired of the whole guessing game. He wanted to crack open his hives in the spring and find every single one of them just, as he put it, busting at the seams with strong, healthy bees, ready to take on the season.
He even had a name for those weak ones, danks. Those little three-frame colonies that just barely scraped through the winter and then needed all this extra care and attention in the spring just to get back on their feet. He just knew there had to be a better way, a way to get strong, productive hives across his entire operation. So, to figure this out, Andrew had to do something pretty gutsy. He had to start questioning one of the most fundamental rules of modern beekeeping. A piece of advice that he and pretty much every other beekeeper had been following like gospel.
And here it is, the big one, the upper entrance. The conventional wisdom, especially where Andrew is on the humid East Coast, is that you absolutely need a little opening at the top of the hive for ventilation. The whole idea is that it lets all that moisture from the bees' breathing escape, right? So you don't get condensation and mold. And Andrew admitted he bought this idea hook, line, and sinker.
But then everything changed. He was talking to a veteran beekeeper from Alberta, a guy named Rick Williams, who gave him what he called a golden nugget of advice. And Rick's approach? It was completely different. It flew in the face of everything Andrew had ever been taught. So that was it. Inspired by this conversation, Andrew decided to run a full-on experiment on all 116 of his hives, and his new setup was going to completely flip that old way of thinking on its head. First things first, he went all out on insulating the top of the hives. He basically created this super insulated hat for each one. He made a kind of sandwich with a reflective barrier and a thick R10 foam board. But the most important part, he taped up every single seam. No drafts at all.
And this is the craziest part, the real kicker. He completely sealed the top. No upper entrance whatsoever. The only way in or out for the bees was from the bottom. Think about it. He was intentionally trapping all that heat and all that moisture inside the hive, the very thing he was always told to avoid.
So, the winter came and went. Spring finally rolled around, and when Andrew went to check on his hives, well, the results of his little counterintuitive experiment were, in his own words, absolutely eye-opening.
Get this. Out of all 116 hives that went through the winter with this new setup, he lost 0. Zilch. Not a single one. It was the first time in his entire beekeeping career that had ever happened.
But here's the thing. It was even better than that. He had finally solved his consistency problem. The hives weren't just alive, they were thriving. They were huge, booming colonies, exactly what he'd been hoping for. We're talking bees already filling up 3 whole boxes by early spring. And this thermal imaging just shows you exactly why it worked. On the left, you've got the old setup. See all that red and yellow on top? That is just heat, pure energy bleeding out into the cold air. Totally wasted. But now look at the right. That's the new setup. It's cool blue on top, because all that precious heat is being held inside, right where the bees need it to stay warm and strong. Yeah, as Andrew put it, with a bit of an understatement, it's a pretty pronounced difference. He wasn't just helping his bees scrape by. He was creating an environment where they could conserve their energy and absolutely flourish. So, the big question is, why does this work so well when it goes against everything beekeepers have been told for so long? Well, the answer isn't some brand new invention. It's actually about looking back, way back, to nature's own blueprint. What Andrew did is a perfect example of something called biomimicry. It turns out his new setup almost perfectly matches the research of Dr. Tom Seeley, a scientist who spent his career studying how honeybees live in the wild, in their natural homes, inside hollow trees. And this table just lays it all out, crystal clear.
Look at a modern hive, barely any insulation on top, and that common upper entrance for ventilation. Now look at a natural bee tree. It's the complete opposite. It's got super thick, highly insulated walls and, critically, a solid top. The only entrance? A single small opening down near the bottom.
So by adding all that insulation up top and sealing that upper entrance, Andrew wasn't really inventing anything. He was just recreating the exact conditions that bees have evolved to thrive in for millions of years. He was letting the colony control its own environment, trapping that heat and moisture to create a stable, warm little world inside, just like nature always intended. It's just such a powerful reminder, isn't it? That sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from questioning the rules we just take for granted, and maybe taking a closer look at the original design. And really, that leaves us with one last thought. What's a long-held rule in your world that might be ready for a second look?